Hi, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman, and on this stream we work on Django apps, and I'm building a homeschool application that I use with my family. It's mostly a process to both do something for my family and educate you all as viewers on how to build a Django application that's actually used in a real-world setting and not just a toy application. So we walk through the process of what does it take to build an app and make it actually do something useful. Tonight we're going to continue on that path. We're going to do some PDF debugging. We've been working on a project to build PDF bundles that will provide reports that a family can use at the end of the year when their school is done. And there were some problems with it. And so we get to dig into what's actually going on, poke around with some Django internals, and poke around with some PDF library stuff, and just explore. So that's what we're going to be doing. Hopefully you stick around and do that exploration with me. You're welcome to ask me anything about Python, Django, or web development. That's what I'm here for. Let me type that out in case somebody catches the stream later. And we'll get going. Before I do get going, though, I want to say thank you to my patrons that support me on Patreon. I want to shout out to Rupert, Andrew, Dragos, Ryan, Patrick, Eric, Fred, a new patron, Aaron, and then Philip, Miguel, Shivan, and Monty. Appreciate your support. You really help motivate me to stick with this stuff. And if you would like to support me, if you like what I do after watching this for a while and want to contribute, you can do so at patreon.com/mblehman. All right, let's get into what we're working on and where we were. We're going to refresh the project, get our heads straight on what's going on, and I can explain to you where my current challenge is. And I've been poking around before the stream started, so that's why I've got a couple of files currently open. We'll dig into what is going on and what we need to correct. So the first thing that I want to resolve is the last time we were working on this, we were rendering a PDF. We're using Weezy print. And the idea behind Weezy print is it takes an HTML template and it takes some CSS and it mixes those things together. And without using Chrome or any kind of browser, it generates a PDF. And we have wired together all the bits of Weezy print to actually do that. But when we did that process, there were a couple of negative outcomes that came out of that we have to correct. The biggest one that actually relates to the PDF itself is that the numbers wouldn't display of all the things. Like all the characters would appear, but the numbers were not appearing. After the stream ended, I had some time to investigate what could be the problem there, and it seems to be that certain fonts could be contributing to why certain characters won't display in Weezy print. So I think what we'll have to do is set the font family that we need when generating PDFs to something that is very well known, very established, like an Arial or not Times New Roman probably, because I don't know that's going to look right for the style, but a sans serif font that we can apply that the rendering process will accept and allow us to render numbers. We'll get to that a little later, but before we even get to that point, we have to fix something with the resolution of the CSS file. So I use Tailwind on this project, and in my process for working with the project, I have to generate a CSS file from Tailwind, and that file is named site.css. And the hope was it would be nice to use the same exact Tailwind file for my PDFs that I use for the rest of the site, and that way I can get a consistent look and feel on with what's going on. I'm just realizing now that my camera is not appearing, so you're not actually seeing me at all. It's just that's interesting. I'm going to poke around on this for a second. Apologize. Let me take this off so you're not staring at my OBS setup. And let's go. Sorry, y'all. So this is supposed to work. It has worked, and this is the first time I've ever seen this not work in terms of my video capture going. So what is going on? Why is my camera not going? Properties. Hello. Elgato. I'm going to try. Well, if I unplug stuff, I have no idea what I'm going to be necessarily unplugging. I think what we're going to do is operate without my face tonight. Not a big loss, but it's just going to be my voice for the evening. Anyway, so where was I? Sorry, got distracted there. We need to make this file resolve. When I was running this test earlier in the previous stream, we would look up this file path with site.css. So we would dig into static file storages, the static file storage, and call this path function on it. And I can show you what would happen in the browser. So let's bring up a application here. And I guess we'll quit out of here for a moment and come back to that file in a minute. And start the application server. And if we go over here and go to the server and go to my dashboard area that has the tool that we were using. And we also need an ID, so we're going to go pull that up as well. I'm just going to speed through this process so I'm not explain everything over and over again so you can get to the heart of what is not working right now. So when we generate this, this is the problem that we're currently facing. It's looking for static files, site CSS. And that path doesn't exist, as the error so helpfully indicates. And so the question is, why is it going to that location? Because in other contexts, in fact, you can see it in action here, it's correctly loading the static file, the site CSS file. We can see that, but we can go to the network tab and we can refresh this page. And in fact, it's got a cache. So you can see it's this line right here. But let's disable the cache for a minute and refresh the page. And then we'll see that it's able to serve the file. So why is it able to serve the file here and not here? And I think the reason for that has to do with the final output of this. So the way I've configured my site in my settings is we've got a static root directory, and that's where we've set this static files. So when the application is built and deployed, all of the static files for the site will be bundled together and put in this directory, and that will be put up into Heroku and then served from there. So that works for deployment, but for local development, you can see that that's a problem. And it's a problem because I don't actually run static files, the static files command locally. So if you look in this directory, there is no static files directory. There's a static directory, but not static files. So I can get by this error by running collect static. And what that will do is it will generate those the files that will go with the bundle normally during deployment. And those things get ignored in version control, and so that's all good. Like you can see, there it is now, the directory now exists. And now we can come back to this area, and I could rerun the server and come back to this thing and click this, and it's not going to blow up on that file error anymore. In fact, it's going to generate the PDF, and we can go ahead and open it in Firefox. And we can see the other problem that we need to correct later. Like this is supposed to be third grade and it didn't render. But that's not really the problem at hand. I want to figure out, how do we get this to work without the static files? Oh, there's a bunch of interesting stuff that we could probably use later when we're doing some debugging. Cool. Good to know that's there. I didn't realize I would dump out from Weezy print. All right, so let's exit out of there. Let's remove that static files directory because I want this to work without that. And then we can see if we can fix it. And now the question is, why make it work without that? What is important and significant about that? I think it will simplify my process, because if it only works with static files, the full directory path, that means that in order to do any of the testing that I need to do, then I need to have run collect static. And as I'm doing my development, my site.css file is going to change. I've got a runner when I'm working locally that is running this tailwind build command. So it's changing a file and dumping it into the static site directory. But note, this is not static files. It's just static. Static files will read from this directory and copy it into, collect static will read from this directory and copy this file into the output. So it's one level of indirection and one more step in my process if I were changing my file. So when I'm running locally, the web server locally in development, it's actually able to read from this path of static site CSS instead of static files site CSS. We need to figure out how do we actually get this same resolution technique that we get from the development server that it seems to be running here. And that's where I'm at with this process and need to explore more. So let's look into why. First, let's understand why this version of this make resource report function failed. Why did it return static files instead of the path that I expected? And to do that, we need to actually look at the storage. So the static file storage is where it's going to pull from. And that's based on the configuration. And I've got two sets of configurations. So both seem different, but as we get down to it, I discover they're actually going to ultimately be the same. So the static file storage that I'm using for most of the time is the white noise compressed manifest static file storage class. And that's a storage interface that defines how to get access to files. When I'm running in testing mode, you can see I was having problems with white noise, so I switched it back to the basic static file storage class that comes with Django. So let's look, when my development server is running, it's actually using this one from white noise. So we need to check that out of what it's doing to resolve that path. So I think I had this open earlier with Vim. Yep, I did. It's in this. So this is my virtual environment. I'm just digging into the actual package itself, which is something I recommend you do. Check out the code. It's a useful technique to understand. And we can see that here is a mixin, and this mixin gets used by this compressed file static file storage, which is the class that, well, it's close to compressed manifest. So there's actually probably one more. That's a combination of both, I bet. Manifest. Okay, well, it's a little bit indirected, but it's pretty close. So it's the manifest static file storage, but you can see ultimately what white noise is doing is really subclass. It's coming from Django itself and then giving it extra behavior. I'm not going to go into what that extra behavior is. You don't need to worry about it. I don't think it's really messing with it, because as we dig into the method that we need to look at, method is not even defined in this area. So the extra processing that's going on from white noise is somewhat unrelated to that path lookup process. So we were using path up here, and so what we need to do is look at the path version that is available in Django. So let's do that. Let's get out of white noise. Let's go to Django. Let's go into contrib and static files and look at the storage classes. So we have the base file system class storage class here, and you can see that the static file storage that we were using, and where's the manifest coming from? It's file system storage class. We're there's more layers upon layers here. I want to understand where that manifest mixin was coming from. Hold on one second. Bigger than I thought. Okay. So there's a manifest mixin. It also has no path method. There's only this one here, and all it's doing is adding some location checking, but otherwise it's delegating to the super. So what we need to do is go look at the file system storage class. That's going to give us our answer, which the file system storage class is located in Django core files storage. So Django core files storage, and we can look for file system storage. Here it is. So now we're down to the actual location. And here's the path. We're finally getting down to brass tacks. So it's doing some safe join on location and a name. So the name in our example is going to be site.css, and there's some kind of safe join utility that's safely joining things, I guess. But then it really gets down to what is this location. So local property, and it's doing an absolute path lookup on the base location. And base location, you can see here, is calling this value or setting helper method, which is right here, saying either take the value or take the setting. And in my scenario, the value that's being passed in and my constructor of the file system storage does not pass in any kind of location. So that value is going to be none. So that tells me that our base location for what we're looking for here to settings media root. We finally have dug up our answer for why what we're seeing as the failure over on this view that previously threw that exception was looking for static files is defined by media root. I think I want to say that media root defaults to whatever static root is. So a way that we can check that, I got to be careful because I have some private key information in here. So I want to show the settings, which we can do, but I want to make sure that we just grep for the media root so that I don't show off too many settings. So there's a command that we can use. And that command is settings. I think we want to use the unified format. And I want to grep for media root so that I don't get too much here. Whoops. Output unified. I don't think it really truly matters. We probably could do it with the other format too, but I like the output unified format. Huh. Media root is not appearing in there? What? Hey, what if I take out that? Oh, come on. Let's put in all. It's probably not doing anything because I don't have any changes, so it's not even bothering to show. Media root. Oh, it's an empty string. So actually perhaps what's really going on is there is a location and I'm just not seeing when it's being configured. That could be the case too. In either case, what we're seeing in the Django area, which I've now gotten far away from, which is too bad, is that the location was wrong. So how do we get to the right one is really the question I have. And so what is it? Well, shoot. I'm looking at this and are we actually streaming anything? I apologize for the interruption, y'all. Like, OBS is not cooperating. So let's take a quick peek at my studio setup and see if we're still streaming. I thought I was. Okay, I'm still streaming. All right. Apologies. OBS is lying to me. Anyway, so what we need to do is get back to how do we find out, how do we make it load just like the settings, the site CSS file is being loaded properly here and not throwing some kind of file error. So there must be something that this code path is doing differently to find the right file to look up instead of the static file's location. So it's not just as simple as a path call here. And so I think the way this is going to happen is I have a feeling we're going to find the answer in the middleware. So if we go to my list of middleware, you can see that I've got I've actually got a customized version of white noise here for reasons. I'm not going to dig into too much, but it's built on top of the white noise middleware. And I added some extra stuff to them to do some things that I needed, but we really care about looking at this white noise middleware class. So if we return back to the virtual environment and look at the storage area, we can go back to the middleware and we can dig into how we can find the right path, because white noise, its job is to handle static files. So that must mean that when it is running in a development mode, it's able to find the right file somehow. It's gotta be in here. And I think that we could follow that to get the file that we want. So we've got, and there's kind of already hints to this right here, where it's got process request, auto refresh. Yeah. Okay. So I've got my debug setting is true. Again, this is another one of those things that I can't really show off too easily without dumping a bunch of information in your face. So I can you gotta do this very carefully, grep debug. So I've got debug turned on, as you can see there. And that means that when the middleware is running, and that's set to true, that means this auto refresh is true. And we also have this use finders feature that's in here that's also set to the debug setting. So use finders, it looks like, how is this working in the init here? So it is adding files from finders. Well, that's not really the case because auto refresh is going to be true here as well. So this is not applying on the init. But it does apply on process request. So auto refresh is true. So it's going into this find file method and to get the static file that it wants to return, and then it will serve that. Otherwise, it's going to not process it and move on. What is find file doing? What is that? It's not even defined. Find file is not defined in here. Well, that's curious. Where is it? It's in this white noise base class, it seems, which is in some file called base. So let's look for find file. All right. So it has some techniques to bail out early. It's looking for the stuff. Find file at path. Get static. I think we're getting there. Getting pretty low in here, but we're getting there. Get static file. We've got, and this might be one where we actually like poke around with this and start to modify what's in the virtual environment to print out some stuff. I could have put in some debug stuff, but I don't know that I want to do that. But it would be interesting to see what's in here and what's actually getting passed along, because it seems like at this point the path has already been determined. And it would have raised an error here. So something else is happening there. So let's try this. I'm going to put a print, and we'll say get static file with path. See what it's resolving to. This is the beauty of like having your own virtual environment. You can just mess around with what's there and it's all good. Let's run this again. So it's ready to go. And I'm going to bring up this page again and clear out all this stuff and just refresh this. And I expect that in our log, we'll have a bunch of print statements. Okay. Cool, there it is. So we want to answer the question, how in the world did that middleware or the base class figure out this path? Because that's the path that we want to use. So let's continue that exploration by going to the virtual, going into library, go to the white noise, go to the base, and what was it, get file something? Nope, get static file. It's gonna be the only print in here. So find file at path. Path. Candidate path for URL. Oh, okay. It is literally, wow, no wonder that's so slow. And it's not very approachable if this is watching video. Thanks for joining in. I guess you won't see me today. I've actually issue with my actual, it looks like it is turned into a red square that is showing up. So apologies for that, but glad you're able to join in. So it looks like the way this works is it iterates through the actual noise system has and knows about, and then tries to brute force it. And it picks a path, and it tries it, and it will, if it gets an exception for a missing file because it didn't find it, then it just goes to the next one. That's pretty crude, but it works. So it makes me wonder if I could use the white noise, if I would want to use white noise directly. I'm starting to get to the point where it's so deep into how white noise works that I'm thinking that maybe it's not a good idea. There are also other ways in Django that will do static file serving. So maybe that's something worth exploring before we commit to another path. And I might ultimately determine that, hey, you know what? It's not worth using this file at all. Let's try a different way altogether. So the other way that we can do this with Django is we need to go look at some stuff for how Django does static files. There's a development server option. And I think it's going to be so you can see here that there's a special view that the Django server, so if you're running manage.py serve, or then it will, run server, you can configure it to use this special view, which will do the same kind of lookup. And you can see it's grossly inefficient. That's all fine. It's probably no worse than what we just saw, but maybe we could use the view to look something up too. Let's check out this chunk of code in Django and see what that code does and see if it's any better. So we're going to go, we're in white noise over here. Let's go back up to Django. And where was that code? That view was in static files views. Yep. Okay. Contrib, static files, views. It's using, oh, interesting. It's using the finders with a normalized path. This might work. This might work with what we need. Let's try it. So we'll try from Django contrib static files import finders. And then we'll say absolute path. We'll just do exactly like they've got over there. Finders, find. And I'm going to say I don't need to give it a path. I know exactly what I want. I want site CSS. And let's print absolute path. I should probably also go back to that middleware that we were on and delete the print line over there. I think we're done with that one. So even though I like the freedom of modifying a virtual environment, I try not to leave the changes in there because I want things to run as the authors intended, even if it's silly stuff like print statements. So now we've got this print in my local PDF method here, and we're going to get a result. Come back over here, and this should fail because we're using the other one. But if we look at the result, aha, cool. That worked. Nice. And I think this will be fine for my purposes. I don't know. Just curious of what's it going to do when static files exist. Will it do the right thing or will it do the wrong thing? Where the right thing when this is in the production context is I want it to actually pull from static files. So let's try running the collect static again and give it the actual proper location. Prefers static. If not, this might be one of the few times where I'm okay using a, nah, I don't actually, never mind. Yeah, never mind. Come back to here. Go back to the previous page. Hit generate, get our exception. Oh, it didn't get the exception because that static files directory existed. Bunch of stuff. Okay, it's still printing out from static. I think that's going to be okay. I don't think it really truly matters because the way that I have configured my static files for my site is I don't generally rely on static files within my Django apps. I use a kind of a global static directory for all my static files. And so having the site finders is not going to be spending a lot of time looking up this URL. So I think that's fine. So what I want to do is I want to change this to site CSS path. And ditch this and ditch this. We're done with static file storages. We're going to use the finders approach. We don't need to, I was actually, my earliest version of this was really trying to come up with a version idea. And we can get rid of the commented outlines here. I think we're down to what we actually need. Okay. So let's get rid of that. Let's remove those static files again. Make sure that it's clear that it's not using those. Come back to this, reload it. And now my claim is that this will work this time because it will be using the thing that's generated by static site CSS instead of static files site CSS. And it did. Cool. Okay. But I should have actually opened that PDF. That's my bad. There's going to be a problem. So we're down to what happened and how do we fix this current issue? Or should we? Maybe there's something that we should be taking from the output that's being dumped out by the So my theory font is wrong, or the font that is used by Tailwind is a font that Weezy Print does not really recognize. That's a more accurate statement. It's a font that your browser understands without any problem, but is not the case for Weezy Print. Is open up, go to Files, and go to the static site. Go to that generated file. Oh, and there, puts it in there early. Apparently there's a bunch of these. So UI sans, I think that those are the things that Weezy Print does not know about. We're going to have to find a font that is down in the line we'll be okay with, whether that's sans serif or Helvetica.